Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Healing Humans. So before we kick off, I just want to do some shout outs. Well, not shout outs, some housekeeping stuff. So straight up, if you're watching this on Facebook, don't forget to hit the like and follow. So you know when we upload videos natively onto Facebook. Secondly, if you are on YouTube, just hit the bell button and the subscribe button, and then you know when we post videos up to YouTube. Okay, so tradition as usual, I'll just say hey to Siôn. Shawnee, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good.
Cool.
So, my website went live today. So yeah, if you wanted to go check it out, go to seanwilliams.com.au. You can book appointments, and also my online shops available. So my products are on there, so you're able to purchase those from the website. We will be doing a Facebook shop as well, so you'll be able to buy them from Facebook soon. Yeah.
Okay, guys. Also, it is available internationally as well. So if you are an international watcher, you are most definitely able to purchase natural products from Siôn. All right, so this episode, guys, we're going to talk about something that has been requested over and over again. We're going to talk about sugar and the Bliss Point. So we're going to kick off straight away. So Shawnee, let's start with sugar. So is sugar good or is sugar bad?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So sugar is yes, sugar is bad for us, and yes, sugar is good for us. It's an interesting question. It's a loaded question, but it's a good question. So sugar, when it's added to all our food, like it is a lot of our manufactured foods, it's bad for us. We'll get to that. But sugar is also very good for us because our bodies primarily run on glucose, on sugar. So sugar, which is sucrose, is one molecule of glucose and one molecule of fructose. So we require that glucose to run, especially our brain. Our brain runs on nothing but glucose, and our body prefers carbohydrate or glucose to run. Now, our body can use other things, like it can break down and use both fats or lipids and proteins. So it can use and create ketones for our body to run on, but it is not particularly productive for our body to do that. Yeah, there are some things that are good for our body in that terms, but ultimately our body wants glucose. That's what it craves. And this is why, things like sugar are so addictive to us.
So we associate sugar as a bad thing because of excess sugar. So how did this happen? How is it post World War II that like everything has sugar, and most people are now trying to limit the amount of sugar or intake rather than allowing the body to absorb as much sugar as they can? What happened? How do we get to this point? How do we get to the point where everything has sugar in it?
Well, so this added sugar that we're referring to, it's called free sugar or added sugar. It's literally in everything that we eat that is manufactured. And this even includes like health foods. You go to the health food section of your supermarket, I guarantee you it's the same thing. It's either full of sugar or it's full of aspartame, which is that artificial sweetener, like an alternative sweetener. Yep. And that's even worse for you than sugar. But so back, I can't remember exactly when, but this American researcher, and I think he's like a psychophysicist, his name was Howard Moskowitz, and he developed this methodology that was referred to as the Bliss Point. And effectively what they're trying to do is they're adding sugar or salt or fat or a combination of all three to the product in order to, I guess, find what is referred to as that deliciousness point. It's that point where you eat it and you go, yes, this is good, and I will buy that again. And there's a certain methodology that they use in order to get that. So yeah, so you have things like sugar, with this added sugar, which really isn't sugar. It's called, sorry guys, that was my phone. That was probably a client of mine. But there is a sugar. The sugar that they add to our food is corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup. Now, interestingly, the fructose in corn is not bad for us, but when you isolate it into a syrup and it's so concentrated, it's really bad for us. You know, our liver can barely manage it. If you were to take that a teaspoon or a tablespoon of that high fructose corn syrup and just drink it straight, you would literally go, oh, you know, that's so sweet. The sweetness is so concentrated. The fats that they add is hydrogenated vegetable oils, which in itself is not good either. That's, you know, it's like trans fat and saturated fat, not good. And the salt is iodized salt. So they iodize the salt. It's meant to help with, I guess, in our diets, there's a real lack of iodine. So that certain governments have their food manufacturers iodize the salt. It's like the same way as they fortify certain milks with calcium. It's the same thing, only this is iodine. So that's not such a bad thing. It's what they use to stop the salt from sticking together. It's the anticoagulant. Yeah, that's really bad. So that can be really bad. So they use those three, sugar, salt, and fat, to create that deliciousness point that gets people hooked or addicted to this. And this is how we end up with this excessive amounts of sugar, because, you know, they recommend that we have like, I think it's like 4 teaspoons of sugar a day, which in grams is probably around about maybe 20 grams a day. Like, that's for everything. And most products have got that much sugar in just that product. So, I mean, we're talking like canned soup, baked beans, spaghetti, pasta sauces, and then you have the Asian stir-in sauces, like your sweet and sour sauces. All these have got these added sugars. I mean, this is just the food. And you go to the health food section, and everything has sugar in it, because everything's low fat. You get your yogurts, your dairy products that are low fat. They're low fat but high in sugar. What else is there? There is and then you go to the beverages. Like, everyone forgets about the beverages. You got your soda drinks or your soft drinks, and most of those have got 25 to 30 grams of sugar in it, and that's about 5 to 7 teaspoons of sugar in them. You know, people are down in those by, you know, the case, a couple of cases of those a week.
And how is this affecting us physically? I'm not sure if we discussed this already, but I know we've talked about it so many times, it's stuck in my head. But the Bliss Point. So this is what the Bliss Point is. Now, what does it do to us physically?
So physically, it makes us fat. So it turns out the fat doesn't make us fat. This concentrated sugar makes us fat. So what happens is when we eat these products that have these hidden sugars in them, obviously our blood sugar elevates, and our liver has, well, we have 2 choices. If our body uses these sugars for life, but if we're living this very sedentary lifestyle that a lot of us Westerners are, what happens is the liver then has to convert all this excess sugar in the bloodstream into what's called glycogen. And so glycogen gets stored in the muscle tissue, skeletal muscle tissue, and in the liver. But it gets to a point where all the muscle tissue and the liver gets full. It's full of this glycogen. And once that happens, the body then starts to turn the glycogen into body fat, or it's called glycogen, and then it then stores it as body fat in adipose tissue, which is fat tissue. We all have this adipose tissue, but a lot of people have it. It's very, very saturated with this body fat. This triglycerides is what that fat is. So, like when you get a blood test and they say you have high triglycerides, what that means is your body's turning a lot of your excess sugar or your excess sugar into triglycerides, because your liver is full of glycogen, your muscle tissue is full of glycogen, like all of your reserves are full, and so it now has to start turning it into body fat. And that's how we know there's something going on in the diet there. There's an excess of glucose intake, which is usually in the form of free sugar. So what happens is these hidden sugars, they add up to a point where you actually end up with excess calories, and our body can't burn these calories and they get turned into body fat. That's probably the simplest way to put it.
So basically, this excess sugar makes us obese. What about why do we eat it? That's the question. Is like, what about the emotional side and stuff like that, the psychological side, maybe even the chemical side of it? Why did this guy arrive at the bliss point? Now, I know we jumped forward and we talked about obesity and stuff like that, but let's just go back to the bliss point. Like, you said it was done by a psychophysicist.
Yeah,
so he's obviously done it. He's done it for marketing reasons. Obviously, he's come up and he's created this equation so that marketers can use it for being able to create food that people will buy. So I think that, tell us more about the more psychological, chemical, and emotional side of the bliss point.
So the idea behind it is to sell products. It's all profit. It's all about, if they can get people emotionally hooked on their product,
addicted?
then
Can we say
addicted? Yeah, addicted. Then people are going to purchase it. They're going to make more money. Like, the whole idea was, what they've done is they've effectively hijacked an evolutionary and biological system within the humans and have used it to create profit. So, using that combination of sugar, fat, and salt, what they've done is they hijacked that reward, that evolutionary or biological reward system within the human being. They got it so that when you eat something and it has that perfect amount of sugar or fat or salt and sugar and whatever, it gets you to go, what they're looking for is something they refer to as optimal deliciousness. And that's what they're looking for. And I mean, you could probably understand what that is. I mean, you would have experienced that optimal deliciousness. That's what they're aiming for. What they do is they have 10.
I'm still dealing with a lifelong sugar addiction. It's horrible. It's so hard. It's funny that I can quit meat, but I can't quit sugar. I can't quit sugar. It's still,
because your body doesn't have the obsession we have with meat is very different to the obsession that we have with sugar. It's very interesting. But it's very interesting. But what they do is they create these different recipes and they give them out to different market research groups. And so what they do is they have like virtually no sugar in this one and a lot of sugar in this one, and then varying amounts of sugar in each one. And they keep handing them to the market research groups, and they do the surveys until they get to the point where over and over again people are going, yes, this is delicious, yes, I'd buy this. And that's when they know that they've got just the right amount of sugar. And that's what they're aiming for, optimal deliciousness. So next time you're chugging down on a can of Coke or you get a hankering for a piece of chocolate or something, that's what they've done. They've hijacked your biological reward system, and they're getting that optimal deliciousness, getting you addicted to the food. Yeah. I mean, it's pure evil.
And because of this, we're obviously we're consuming so much fat, sugar, salt. But let's stick to sugar. And like you mentioned just before, is that sugar is the reason we're getting fat. amongst other things as well that come with the sugar. So what's our average like calorie? Is it calorie? What is it when it goes out? Kilojoule? No.
Calorie.
Sorry,
You're right.
calorie. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Calorie. So
Calorie
basically,
out?
the average, let's go with a man. Let's go with something like a sedentary male. So the average sedentary male is told that they're supposed to eat around about 2,500 calories in order to maintain their weight. Now, this is untrue. This is why for a lot of people, the weight goes up, because the truth is that most an average sedentary male burns, let's say, around about 2,000 calories a day. Now, it wouldn't take much for a sedentary male to eat, say, like 2,800 calories a day. It wouldn't take much. So their excess is about 800 calories a day, which is 5,600 calories a week. You can tell I've done this example a few times. So what that equates to is 500 grams of fat being deposited into the body every week. All right. So what happens is you do that over a period of 12 months. So you have a sedentary male who's eating what is effectively a normal Western diet. He's exceeding his calorie intake by about 800 calories a day, which is just over 5,500 calories a week, which equals 500 grams. Like, it wouldn't take long. It wouldn't take long. You could literally easily put 20 kg on in 12 months. And that's how it happens. That's how people, suddenly find themselves 4 or 5 years later going from 70 kg, 75 kgs optimal weight for somebody who's around about 5'8", 5'9", who is not a
You just switched
bodybuilder.
from imperial to metric imperial.
Yeah, I did. So say like 175, 177.
Yeah.
75 kg, and it wouldn't take long, say like 3 years maybe, for them to be cracking 100 kgs easy.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
That's why it's important to stay active. I was listening to a podcast the other week that says that, like, every single piece of exercise counts. Like walking the dog, walking down the street, like to wherever, everything counts. Like we have this mentality with exercise that it's like it's all or nothing. And so what happens a lot of time is that people just do nothing. And so this, the weight gain, it's easy.
Yeah.
All right,
so as I said before, it doesn't take long. It only takes a few years to go from your optimal weight, which you were in your 20s. Like, it's very hard these days because a lot of the younger fellas now, or a lot of young people, are really into that, energy drinks, and that's why they're all overweight and obese, struggling to maintain weight because they forget about the drinks. I've had clients who come and see me and say, I eat a really good diet, but I can't seem to lose the weight. And you ask, okay, so what have you drunk today? Oh, I had a half a liter can of Mother about 8:30 this morning. What else? And then I had a takeaway coffee, and already you think to yourself, there you go, you've just blown your calorie intake straight out the water right there. Yeah. So it's not hard, but it doesn't take much. It only takes a couple of years to break that 100 kg and start heading towards 110, 120 kg when you're a sedentary male, 5'8".
And it all just comes from one dude discovering, through scientific research, which he then sold to marketing company. Marketed it to food companies. So with all this sort of sugar intake, what's happening to us? Like, what are we looking at? Like, with this amount of sugar intake, like, it has to lead to some sort of dysfunction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, straight away we could talk about diabetes, but believe it or not, diabetes isn't the biggest problem. The biggest problem is heart disease. You see, a lot of the biggest problem we have from consuming so much of these manufactured foods with the hidden sugars and things like that, is we actually begin to get things like heart disease. You know, there are studies that, fatty deposits. There's studies that show that, you know, an increased consumption of that free sugar. So when I refer to free sugar, I'm not referring to fruit sugar, as in the sugar that's found in fruit. I'm not talking about glucose found in clean carbohydrates. I'm talking about free sugar that's found in this added sugar.
Food.
Yeah. And so there's studies that show that, you know, that heart disease is linked to, you know, one of the risk factors that increase heart disease is that manufactured high added sugar intake. Increase
plus obesity.
Yeah, and so definitely
that's
high blood pressure.
Yeah, so twofold right there. If you're fat because you eat too much sugar, you have a chance of heart disease, and then you consume too much sugar, you have a chance of heart disease. Yeah,
exactly. You know, it definitely increases your inflammation levels, or your inflammation markers definitely go up. You got like your acnes. What does that mean? So your inflammation levels, your inflammatory markers just explode. They are a pathology method of indicating how much.
So when you have a blood test,
it tells you how much inflammation you have in your body. See, when your body is exposed to any form of trauma, your body goes through something called the inflammation cascade, and so you have all these different hormones and chemicals released into the bloodstream and the lymphatic system, and it attracts. Well, first of all, it dilates all the blood vessels in the vicinity, and then it also begins to. So you get a lot of white blood cells go into the area, a lot of platelets, a lot of clotting factors, and those sort of things going into the area. And so if you have a lot of these in your blood, they are an indication of your inflammation markers. So if you have high levels of these factors in your blood, then it tells your doctor or your whoever it is, your practitioner, tells them that, you know, you've got some form of trauma going on in your body. Now, trauma can be a puncture wound, anything from a puncture wound from a nail, gunshot wound. It can be something like a damage from a chemical that's entered your body or your bloodstream. It can be trauma from your lungs. Maybe you're breathing in something that's not good, like dust. Cigarettes, very good. It can be in your gut. Pardon me. It can be in your gut from poor diet. You know, it's all trauma. Trauma is like an umbrella term for so many different things, but that's what is happening. That's what the inflammation markers evaluate, is how much trauma is going on in your body. And as I said, trauma isn't necessarily what we think it is. It can be, you know, all the chemicals that come from meat digestion that cause trauma increases your inflammation levels. Yeah. Acne.
Right, man. Sorry, I interrupted you. Yeah, you were about to start talking about acne. So go ahead.
So acne, high sugar diets are, you know, they increase, you know, the likelihood of acne outbreaks, the aggressiveness of acne. It's all comes down to, you know, high sugar diets. High sugar
so
diets.
Really, so if I understand from when we were talking about it last week, the reason you get acne from high sugar from consuming too much sugar is more to do with your gut rather than your skin.
That's correct.
Because I know we talked about this last week. Okay, see, I'm learning.
Absolutely. So when you have a very sugary environment in your body as well, it promotes the growth of things like yeast and fungus and things like that, which also add to it. It imbalances all that gut microbiome, which is so important to your health. It also increases like your androgen secretion, which is your sex hormones. So these are your estrogens and your testosterones. So it just throws all your hormone levels out, increases all the oil production in your skin, because your body's trying to excrete a lot of these, you know, everything that's involved in in sugar metabolism. So,
Okay. Yeah.
and then once again, it comes down to the inflammation. You're going to have high levels of inflammation in the body. The body's going to want to try and get rid of all this. Quickest way out of the body is the skin, and so you'll have more aggressive outbreaks. My advice is get off it, get away from the manufactured foods.
Yeah. So basically, to break that down into someone, for someone who's not sort of in the naturopathic industry, let's see if I can get this. So if you give in to your Bliss Point all the time and consume like manufactured food and sugary products, knowingly doing it, okay, as well, you're pretty much giving yourself, or I shouldn't say giving yourself, but aggravating your acne further by consuming these products.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
You're aggravating the underlying cause. Yeah.
So basically, like, just if you are suffering from really bad acne, your sugar intake definitely has something to do with it, and that you really should just stop and consume water and sort of natural foods.
Definitely salad-based.
I just want to say
fruit.
that.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you're consuming junk, you will continue to aggravate your acne.
That's correct.
And psoriasis.
So the most commonly associated condition with sugar is type 2 diabetes. Now it's interesting. So type 2 diabetes is really interesting. It can be, studies have shown that, well, they've actually done clinical trials as well, where they can actually create type 2 diabetes in people through using fat, animal fat. So it's really interesting. But sugar also, obviously, excessive amounts of sugar creates insulin resistance and things like that. So if you're obese, obviously your body's producing a lot of glycogen to try and store that excess sugar in your body. And so by doing that, once everything's full, it starts creating body fat. So when you end up with a lot of fat, a lot of triglycerides and things like that, you do begin to get things like insulin resistance, which is type 2 diabetes. So it's it's a very common thing, I guess, with people. Obviously, obesity is something that is a risk factor in type 2 diabetes. Yeah, and I mean, that all has a knock-on effect into the cancers and things like that. When you do become obese, you have that excessive amount of sugar. You're able to, like, you literally feed that cancer. That's why they say get away from all the sugars, and it doesn't feed the cancer. What happens is, if you have a system that is saturated with glucose, you can feed anything that requires glucose in that system. It'll live no matter what your body tries to do. So you take a tumor. A tumor is the body's attempting to encapsulate, say, like a cancer cell. So let's say you have a bundle of cancer cells that are no longer doing what they're supposed to do. The body encapsulates it with a tumor and attempts to, let's say, starve it. It's almost like sieging a castle, just trying to starve it out. But if you have an abundance of glucose around the body, the body has to grow the tumor in order to starve the cancer out in the middle, and eventually the tumor becomes an issue in itself. So that's why they say cutting out excessive amounts of sugar of your diet. Obviously, you don't cut all sugar because plants
have to function.
Yeah, but vegetables and fruit are still sugar, and there's proven that these type of diets assist in cancer conditions. So there's no way I'm going to tell you to stop eating all sugar, because sugar comes from your salad-based vegetables, your fruits, all these type of things as well. But
let's discuss. Let's talk about how the Bliss Point and overconsumption of these products can affect depression, like a lot of mental illnesses, shall we say?
Absolutely. So, I mean, we've only got to go to our kids to see what happens and we can see it to an extreme level in our children when you give them sugar. Like, they become extremely hyperactive and then they crash. Now, you take an adult and do the same thing. What you have is this happy, extroverted person that all of a sudden becomes extremely introverted and withdrawn. Like, this is the that dopamine, endorphin system working again. Like they have a lot of sugar and things like that. They're happy, they're euphoric, and et cetera, et cetera. And then once the sugar wears off, they go to become low, so they crash. That's why it creates like this this vicious cycle of ups and downs. And as I said, we can see that in our children. We can see it to an extreme amount in our children. But when you get to an adult, obviously you learn to manage those euphoric highs to the point where that's your norm. That becomes your norm. And then when you come off the sugar, it just creates this like depression. And so
you're like a functioning manic sort of thing. And then, which is, interrupted by moments of depression.
That's why this is why cleaning up your diet. Very controversial. Yeah, cleaning up your diet really helps in things like depression. It sounds so arbitrary. It does. It just, for a lot of people, it doesn't seem like it's related.
Yeah, so that's something the world definitely needs to change their view, is that they think that all mental problems are in the brain, and it's like, no, the brain is attached to your body. You need to look around more, and it's very controversial, to think that like you could be misdiagnosed with manic depression when actually what you have is a sugar addiction.
Yeah, and it sounds fully ridiculous. It does, and I wouldn't blame a lot of people for shaking their heads and just like thinking it's ridiculous.
Turning this video off right now. And we ask you not to, because we're the same. Like I'm still very mainstream in a lot of my thinking. You are not. I am, and but like as someone mainstream, you have to take the blinkers off and realize that your brain is connected to your body, and that like your brain is affected by a lot of the things that you eat. And if like you don't stuff like drugs into your ear because that's the closest thing to your brain. You ingest them, which it doesn't go straight away to you take an antidepressant, it goes to your stomach first. So if the thing that's masking your symptoms starts in your stomach and goes up to your brain or wherever, imagine what other drugs can do, like sugar, cocaine. Put some speed into a glass of water and drink it, like it's still going to affect your brain. And that's why we have to change this mentality that like it's all in your head and you have emotional problems. It's like, do we, or are we a society that is so ingrained in addiction that we can't even recognize, that we're all addicted to something, and that we're all just getting withdrawals and symptoms of, coming off our drug. And some people never get those withdrawals because they're just going to the shop and feeding the addiction, or they're going to the cupboard or the fridge, and then they're up on their high again.
Well, those
but even when you're up on your high,
because even when you're up on your high,
you're still dealing like with the addiction. Like you're still up there going, oh my God, why do I feel like this? I'm just crazy. People don't like me, and that's the sugar high. And then you get dumped, and you're like, oh, I feel like shit. I've got to have a coffee with some sugar in it, and it's.
And then you take it,
and we can't recognize, and then we're back up again. And people can't recognize that as addiction.
Yeah, and those addictions create habits. And so we end up, and then those habits become society wide, and then it just becomes this accepted, like norm, like walking around at 7 o'clock in the morning with half a liter of energy drink in your hand, and nobody even bats an eyelid, and then.
Even more acceptable is coffee, like, walking around with coffee, a latte, cow's milk and stuff like that. And nobody bats an eyelid, is fine, but it's still like caffeine creates an addictive response in the body, plus your sugar,
and I mean, studies have shown that this increase of sugar and processed food increases depression in both men and women. They've shown that it can do that. They've done the studies, where they've given candidates of these studies different manufactured foods with this hidden or added sugar, and they watch them, and they test them, and they show, yeah, look at this, your endorphin and dopamine levels are elevated right now, and then they test them an hour or two later, and oh look, they haven't gone back to normal, they've actually dropped below normal, and now you're actually in a deficit. So it's really interesting to what to
so
see these
maybe
things.
maybe our mental health issue is actually our food.
Big time.
But
big
again,
time.
we can almost guarantee that this study has been done and proven, but like it'll never come out because we're all plugged into the idiot box, and the idiot box is owned and financed by massive companies that have made money from food. So they're not going to go into their own channels of advertising, of marketing. They invented all these news programs and all these TV shows to promote in between them. Like everything else, everything has come from marketing. The television would not be here today without marketing.
Yeah, that's
of every kind of product.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just got my little tinfoil hat on. So, yeah, man, it's crazy.
But I mean, with the hidden sugars, like it goes further and further. Like you get like liver disease. Like we've got this. You got your alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is the obvious one. Obviously, it's from alcohol. But then, what about this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? And those studies have now shown that is from eating excessive amounts of, extremely elevated levels of sugar. And what that is, it's just your liver. It's just a buildup of fat on your liver. And that fat is that adipose tissue that is generated from that constant buildup of sugar, and the liver trying to do something with it, because just very often we urinate it out, but very often.
What about the kidneys? Are the kidneys all right or no?
No, kidneys should be the same. So once the body starts to build up that excess fat, that excess glucose that gets turned into body fat, once that happens, it puts it everywhere. It puts it all over the place. That's why when they do autopsies, and a lot of people, a lot of Westerners especially, you have that plaquing of the arteries, cholesterol plaquing on the arteries. You have it all through the abdominal cavity. So that's the liver, the spleen, the kidneys, the GI tract. Everything just gets coated in fat because the body's just trying to store it. When
you were talking about the liver then, Shawnee, you mentioned alcoholism, and one thing, and you said it's the same. You said there's two things. What about gout? Because I know like a lot of alcoholics get gout, man. Is that something you get from sugar as well?
Look, gout is a buildup of uric acid in the joints. So uric acid is actually just a byproduct of cell metabolism. It's one of the many acids that the body produces naturally, and then should naturally excrete through the urine. If you have a buildup if you have gout, which is a buildup of uric acid in the joints, especially that the lower extremities where it usually comes from, I would be looking at the lymphatic system and the kidneys, the adrenals, definitely, because I'd be looking at what's going on there, especially the kidneys, because obviously the liver is like a chemical processing plant. It breaks down chemicals, good or bad. It breaks them down into their constituent atoms, molecules, whatever, and the body either reuses those that chemistry, or it eliminates it through the kidneys. So if I had a buildup of uric acid in my body, I'd be looking at two things. First of all, what's my liver kidneys are doing, and am I eating something, or is there something in my diet that would increase that uric acid? And well, alcohol is just fermented sugar. It's just sugary water that's been fermented.
Oh yeah.
So it would definitely add to it, especially since the byproduct of almost everything in the body is acidic. Cell respiration, everything's acidic. Carbon dioxide, acidic. So we say it's a buildup of uric acid, but I think generally it's a buildup of acids. I think we just like to uric acid is something we see a lot of in the joints, and so that's why we say that's the cause. But to be honest, it's probably just a buildup of acids in general in the body. Uric acid is definitely a indication of something more systemic. It's not just your toe; it's systemic. Definitely. Yeah.
All right. So what sugars can we eat? So you mentioned fruit before. Tell us more about why you don't get fat from sort of like eating fruit sugars.
Fruit is interesting. Fruit is very, very interesting because it contradicts what we think we know about sugar and what we know about the human body. So first of all, fruit doesn't make you fat, mainly because, yes, it's full of fructose, and we have that high fructose corn syrup, which is extremely concentrated and very bad for our health. But when you get that corn fructose in its natural form in the corn, like, it's full of water and it's full of fiber, and so it's a completely different complex of food, I guess, than something that is just concentrated. I mean, a lot of nutritionists, a lot of dietitians, when there were studies done on fruitarians, that they were very surprised of what are the results. Like, first of all, what they found was a lot of people who ate fruit, they were smaller, had smaller waistlines. When they were observed, they had better everything from resting heartbeats to blood pressure. Everything was surprisingly really good. Even blood sugar levels were good. No diabetes in these people either, which also contradicts the science a little bit. But yeah, basically it was shown that these guys were these communities of fruitarians were skinny. Like, there wasn't a single fat one amongst them. So it was really interesting. And when they did a bit more studies, I guess they went and did a bit more research. What they found was that fruits is a very low calorie food. It actually assists in weight loss. Like, even your national food guides and your
The pyramid.
yeah, and your dietitians, they'll all agree that fruit helps it helps with weight loss. Now, there are certain foods in the plant kingdom which are what are referred to as negative calories. There's very few of them, but most of them are fruit. So a negative calorie is a food that when you eat it, the calories that are contained within that food are all completely burnt just in digesting that food, if that makes any sense. It's so low calorie that if you were to eat that food, the amount of energy it would take to chew chemically and then mechanically digest that food is actually more than what's actually in the food. So an example of that is apples, all berries. So that's like strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries. These watermelons are another one. There are some vegetables, but they're things like broccoli and cauliflower, and nobody likes broccoli or cauliflower. So I didn't put them in. And the reason that this is because fruit has this thing called a low glycemic load. Now, I can't say lied to, we've been misdirected when it comes to the glycemic index. So the glycemic index is basically it's a chart that calculates, how can I put it, how rapidly a carbohydrate is digested and then released as glucose into the blood. So that's what the glycemic index indicates, which is great, except it really doesn't tell us much about what we're eating. That's all it does, is it tells us that our food will break down at this rate and then release into our blood at this rate. And the higher the number, the worse it is, and the lower the number, the better. But the truth is there's actually a better indication, and that is called the glycemic load. So when you look at any food, or most foods that are high on the glycemic index, they're usually very low on the glycemic load. And the glycemic load is a better indication of how that carbohydrate is going to affect our blood sugars. And fruit is really low on the glycemic load but really high on the glycemic index. And that's really important. That everyone should know that. So we're being lied to a little bit with this whole glycemic charting. So you want to go with the glycemic load of a food and try and ignore that glycemic index. So the interesting thing is a lot of manufactured foods are very low on the glycemic index, but very high on the glycemic load because they have all the hidden sugars in it. So please take note of that. That's an interesting one. Take note of that. So all the hidden sugars in most of our manufactured foods, in fact, they spike our blood sugars. And when you spike the blood sugar, or you load the blood with too much glucose, the body begins to produce glycogen and then body fat. Whereas something that is low on the glycemic load doesn't affect blood sugar. So that's why they've done interesting studies where they've had type 1 diet and type 2 diabetics eat fruit, and it barely moves the blood glucose levels, blood sugar levels barely move. Yeah, which is interesting because, well, according to the research, that's not supposed to happen. It's supposed to be the opposite, because fruit is a very high sugar food. It should really be moving that blood sugar. But the interesting thing is, see, when we test the blood sugar, we test glucose levels, but fruit is fructose. And you see, glucose requires certain assistance to get from the blood into the cell and throughout the body. It constantly needs to go through these channels in the cell, whereas fructose travels like water through the body. It's unhindered. It just goes like diffusion through the body, whereas glucose requires channels to get through the body, so through the cells, through the cell wall, through the gastrointestinal tract wall. It requires all these different channels, whereas the fructose just is like water. It just diffuses through the cell naturally, which sort of suggests
sorry, go carry on.
Which may suggest to everyone like how important the fructose actually is to the human body. So that's fructose that is found in fruit, so not the fructose that is isolated to sweeten our food. So
real fructose that comes out of the fruit. Yeah, if you're not chewing fruit, it's not real. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. So, and when people talk about fructose being bad for you, you need to differentiate the difference between what they're referring to. They're referring to that high fructose corn syrup, which is manufactured and is concentrated, like 1,000 times more concentrated than you'll find in a fruit, like an apple or something like that. It's so concentrated that it's almost like poison to the human body. That's what they're referring to when somebody says to you, "Oh, fructose is bad for you," understand that they think that fructose is bad for them, but that is what they're referring to. They're not referring to the fructose that is found in natural fruit, because nobody on this planet thinks that fruit is bad for you. There's no science that backs that up. There's nothing that is believable, because once again, you can put anything on PubMed, but like there's nothing that is believable. That's
peer reviewed, I guess.
Yeah, there's peer reviewed and stands up to scrutiny that suggests that fruit is bad for us in any way. Yeah.
So is there, can you give the viewers any material that might be good to read on the Bliss Point and sugar? Have you read any books? I know YouTube is good, guys. Like, I always say, like, Google parents, like, we don't need parents anymore. Google can tell you everything. So Google, definitely, from me as someone who knows nothing, Google and YouTube will definitely be able to give you some entertaining and hopefully factual content on the Bliss Point and sugar and stuff like that. But Shawnee,
So there is a movie called That Sugar Film, I think it's called, or That Sugar Movie, That Sugar Film. It's by an Australian comedian who went on a health food diet for, I think it was like 12 weeks. So he ate only out of the health food aisle for all 3 meals a day. And it just shows how he gained, I think it was like 12 kilos. maybe it was 8 kilos, but he gained a lot of weight. And he was like, at one point he was trying to eat the food and was vomiting because his body didn't want it. Yeah.
So that sugar film.
That sugar film, and it goes to show you.
It's on Netflix?
Yeah, it was on Netflix. But
Okay.
it's what the movie does is it shows you. Oh, I just lost you.
No, I'm sorry.
So what the movie shows is how you can go to the health food section of a shop of your supermarket and still find all those hidden sugars.
All the marketing strategies
yeah.
to get you to eat it.
Especially the yogurts or the yogurts. He was going and he was having like one or two a day. And it was the healthy stuff, the Greek yogurt. And he was showing how it had the hidden sugars in it. It was interesting. But yeah.
What bit of advice would you give to someone who's about to kick off on a maybe they are vegan, maybe people are looking to go healthy? What's the one bit of advice you can give them when it comes to shopping, supermarket?
Read the back of everything. Anything that you're picking up that's coming off a shelf that's not refrigerated or frozen, not frozen or iced, comes from the produce section. Like, pick it up, check the back of it, look at the ingredients, look how much sugar is in it.
So basically, if it has a package, read the back of it.
Yeah, read the back of it. I find the best thing to do is stay away from anything except the produce aisle, because even your bread has sugar in it. Pasta has sugar in it.
And a lot of the stuff that you go to the refrigerator section and it says vegan, that's another one you should really check, because just because it's vegan, it doesn't mean that it's healthy.
Exactly.
So that's the biggest controversial thing that I've seen on a lot of Australian vegan Facebook groups at the moment, is people are saying like, just because it says vegan doesn't mean, one, that it is vegan, and two, that it's healthy. Like, sugar is vegan.
It is.
Corn syrup, is vegan.
Yeah. Check it. Check your products. Check everything as it's going into the trolley. You will find in amongst everything, you will find small brand names that you don't recognize, and they will have what you're looking for. I found when I was looking for coconut milk and things like that for my daughter, a lot of the supermarket brands, they were either fortified with calcium carbonate, and they had sugar in it, added sugar to it. And it wasn't until I found a product called Pure Harvest that I found something that actually had coconut. It had coconut water, rice milk, sea salt. That was the only ingredients in it. Yeah. And I found that it was in the long life milk section of the supermarket. It blew my mind.
That's why it's so hard. It's so hard to eat healthy, because unless you have like, an acre block of land in a good black fluffy soil area where you can drop down crops, you can go hunting in a forest nearby where you won't deplete the game. If you're a meat eater, like, you're literally you have no options. Like, people are walking around saying like, we've got global warming and all this stuff, and it's like, guys, everything we're eating is just horrible. Like, even a lot of you go into the produce section and a lot of that stuff is full of chemicals as well that's been sprayed. So we have no options, and so you just gotta try to at least, you can wash your vegetables and stuff like that, and you can't wash your steak, or you can't wash the added hormones away from your steak, and you can't remove the added sugar from like vegan spread, or the added, it's so difficult. The problem is now is that we have so many products that we're so used to, like putting certain types of healthy spreads onto our healthy bread, and like that's only been around for like 100 years, if that. So, it's the 20s now. So 100 years. So there's so many things that we're so used to, but for the last like 4,000 years have never been consumed by humans. And now in 100 years, we're creating things that are literally poisonous to us, and yet we're addicted to it. Like Coca-Cola.
Like cigarettes.
Well, cigarettes have been around for a long, long time. But yes, at least we're in Australia. At least in Australia, like you come to Europe, man, and it's like 1940 in Australia. Everybody has a cigarette in their mouth. So there's more smokers than non-smokers, basically.
Really? Well, they've made it impossible to smoke in this country.
Good.
$40 a pack of 30 cigarettes. It's impossible.
So it's now happening here in Denmark. So maybe a year and a half ago, they put up the grey plastic covers on the cigarettes in shopping in the supermarkets. So that's a start. I keep telling people about this wonderful thing where you can actually sit at a restaurant outside and not have the person next to you light up a cigarette. So it's disgusting. So
yeah, no worries. All right.
Anyway, yeah. So I think that's it, guys. It's been a really good chat. I just want to one more time shout out. Okay, so if you're watching this on Facebook, guys, make sure that you click on the Siôn Williams Naturopath link that's at the top. It's his name. It's blue normally. Click on it. Head through to his page and hit the like and the follow. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe and the bell buttons so you know when we release videos. All right, guys, it's been good chatting. Siôn, as usual, it's been really good, man, really informative. It all makes sense. So any last words?
Go look at my website. Give me some constructive criticism. And yeah, I'm looking forward to going to bed because it's pretty late here now.
Oh, okay. All right, bro beans. Have a good one. We'll talk later.
No worries, man. You have a good one.
All right, bye.
See ya.